Most people don't actually struggle to start changing. They struggle to continue. That's why so many people repeat the same cycle. Motivation. Excitement. Temporary action. Then slowly, everything fades. Old habits return. Old thinking returns. Old behaviors return. And eventually, they end up exactly where they started. Not because they're weak. Not because they're incapable. But because temporary motivation is not enough to create permanent transformation. Real change is deeper than behavior. It's deeper than routines. It's identity. Because people always return to who they believe they are. If someone believes, I'm lazy, I'm inconsistent, I never finish anything, then even when they try to improve, their identity pulls them backward. That's why external motivation eventually fades. Because identity always wins. And until your self-image changes, your life struggles to change permanently. Most people try to change their habits without changing the identity behind those habits. And that's why the change never lasts. Because behavior is always connected to self-image. If someone sees themselves as unhealthy, they may start exercising temporarily. But internally, their mind still says, this isn't who I am. So eventually, they return to old behaviors. Not because they lack discipline, but because the brain wants consistency between identity and action. Your mind constantly tries to protect the story you believe about yourself. That's why identity is powerful. If you believe, I'm confident, you act differently. If you believe, I'm always behind, your behavior reflects that too. Most people focus only on external goals. Lose weight, make money, wake up early. But lasting transformation begins internally. Who am I becoming? Because once identity shifts, behavior becomes easier. You no longer force yourself to act differently. It starts feeling natural. One of the strangest things about human behavior is this. Backhand index pointing right people often stay attached to pain they're familiar with, even when it hurts them. Because familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar change. Think about it. People stay in toxic environments. Stay in unhealthy routines. Stay stuck in limiting patterns. Not because they enjoy suffering, but because the brain prefers certainty. Even painful certainty. Change introduces uncertainty. And uncertainty feels dangerous to the mind. So your brain says, backhand index pointing right, stay where it's familiar. Even if familiar means unhappy. That's why people sabotage growth. Not consciously. Backhand index pointing right emotionally. Growth feels unfamiliar. And unfamiliar things create fear. So instead of moving forward, people retreat into old patterns that feel emotionally safe. That's why change requires courage. Not just motivation. Because you must become willing to leave behind the comfort of familiarity in order to build something better. Motivation feels powerful in the beginning. You watch something inspiring, feel emotionally energized, promise yourself things will change. And for a moment, you believe it. But then reality appears. Discomfort returns. Effort feels heavy. Life becomes normal again. And motivation fades. Why? Because motivation is emotional. Backhand index pointing right, it rises and falls. That's why relying only on motivation is dangerous. Emotion is temporary. Identity is stable. When people depend entirely on feeling motivated, they only take action when emotions are high. But disciplined people understand something different. Backhand index pointing right action must continue even when emotion disappears. That's why systems matter more than temporary inspiration. And identity matters more than excitement. Because when behavior becomes part of who you are, consistency stops depending on mood. One of the biggest reasons people struggle to change is this. Their environment keeps reminding them who they used to be. Even when someone genuinely wants to grow, they often stay surrounded by the same routines, habits, conversations, and distractions that built the old version of them in the first place. And over time, that environment pulls them backward. Because your surroundings influence your behavior more than you realize. The people around you affect your mindset. The content you consume affects your thinking. Your daily routines shape your emotional patterns. Everything around you is constantly reinforcing identity. That's why change feels easier in certain environments, and harder in others. If you're trying to become focused, but your environment constantly encourages distraction, your growth becomes a daily battle. If you're trying to become disciplined, but your surroundings reward comfort and procrastination, your old identity stays alive. This is why transformation often requires environmental change. Not necessarily dramatic change, but intentional change. Sometimes that means changing what you watch, changing your routines, changing who influences your thinking. Because if your environment constantly feeds the old version of you, it becomes difficult for the new version to survive. Powerful environments create powerful habits. And powerful habits reinforce powerful identities. So ask yourself honestly. Does your current environment support the person you want to become, or the person you're trying to outgrow? Because your surroundings are shaping you every single day, whether you notice it or not. Most people think transformation happens through massive breakthroughs. One big decision. One huge moment. One dramatic life change. But real identity change usually happens quietly. Through repeated small actions. Every action you take sends a signal to your brain. When you wake up early even once, your brain notices. When you stay disciplined for one day, your brain notices. When you keep a promise to yourself, your brain notices. And slowly, those actions begin creating evidence. Evidence that says, maybe I am becoming more disciplined. Maybe I can change. Maybe this new identity is real. That's why consistency matters more than intensity. Because identity is built through proof. Not motivation. Not wishes. Proof. And proof comes from repeated behavior. This is where most people fail. They try to change everything at once. They chase perfection immediately. And when they can't sustain it, they quit. But sustainable transformation works differently. Small actions repeated consistently create powerful change over time. Because every repeated action strengthens the identity connected to it. You don't become disciplined overnight. You become disciplined by repeatedly acting like a disciplined person. One decision at a time. That's how identity evolves. Quietly. Daily. Repeatedly. Most people are waiting. Waiting to feel motivated. Waiting to feel confident. Waiting to feel prepared. But the truth is, you may never feel fully ready. Because growth always feels uncomfortable in the beginning. That discomfort is normal. But many people mistake discomfort for a sign they shouldn't move forward. So they delay action. Again and again. They tell themselves, I'll start tomorrow. I need more confidence first. I'm not ready yet. But confidence rarely comes before action. Confidence comes from action. People become stronger by doing difficult things repeatedly. Not by waiting for fear to disappear. That's why courage is so important. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's movement despite fear. And every time you act despite discomfort, your identity shifts a little more. You begin proving to yourself, I can handle difficult things. I can move forward even when I'm uncertain. That's how real confidence is built. Not through thinking. Through experience. So stop waiting for the perfect emotional state. There is no perfect moment. The people who transform their lives are not always fearless. They simply stop letting fear make their decisions. And once you stop waiting to feel ready, you begin creating momentum. Your life is shaped by what you repeat consistently. Not occasionally. Backhand index pointing right consistently. Repeated thoughts become beliefs. Repeated behaviors become habits. Repeated habits become identity. That's why repetition is powerful. Your brain adapts to patterns. Whatever you do often enough begins feeling natural. At first, change feels difficult because the behavior is unfamiliar. Your brain resists it. But through repetition, the resistance weakens. And eventually, the new behavior feels automatic. That's how transformation happens. Not through one giant moment. Backhand index pointing right through repeated daily patterns. This is why small habits matter more than people think. Reading a few pages daily. Exercising consistently. Speaking positively to yourself. These actions may seem small individually, but repeated over time, they completely reshape identity. And the opposite is also true. Repeated negativity strengthens limitation. Repeated procrastination strengthens avoidance. Repeated excuses strengthen weakness. Every repetition trains the mind. The question is, what are you training yourself to become? Because your repeated patterns are building your future identity right now. Whether intentionally or unconsciously. Real transformation begins when you stop obsessing over goals and start focusing on identity. Most people ask, what should I do? But deeper change happens when you ask, who am I becoming? Because your behavior follows identity naturally. If you identify as someone disciplined, your actions begin aligning with that belief. If you identify as someone focused, your habits gradually reflect it. That's why identity-based growth is powerful. You're no longer forcing temporary behaviors. You're becoming a different person internally. And once identity changes, consistency becomes easier. Because actions no longer feel unnatural. They feel aligned. This is why lasting transformation requires patience. You are not just changing routines. You are rebuilding self-image. That takes repetition, awareness, and intentional action over time. But eventually, the new version of you begins feeling real. Not forced. Not fake. Real. And once that happens, your behavior starts flowing naturally from that identity. That's when transformation becomes sustainable. Most people never change their lives because they try to change behavior without changing identity. They focus only on actions. Wake up earlier. Work harder. Be more disciplined. But eventually, they fall back into old patterns. Why? Because identity pulls behavior back toward familiarity. Your life will always move toward the version of yourself you believe most deeply. That's why lasting transformation is internal first, not external. Real change happens when your beliefs change, your self-image changes, your daily actions reinforce a new identity. That's when behavior stops feeling forced and starts becoming natural. Because the brain always seeks consistency between identity and action. So if you truly want to change your life, stop asking, how do I stay motivated? And start asking, Who am I becoming through my daily choices? Because every action matters. Every repeated decision is shaping your future identity. Every small habit is reinforcing a story about who you are. And over time, that story becomes your reality. So the question is, are your daily actions reinforcing the person you want to become? Or the person you're trying to leave behind? Because transformation doesn't happen in one moment. It happens through repeated choices that slowly create a new identity. And once identity changes, everything else begins to follow. Most people don't stay stuck because they lack potential. They stay stuck because they keep repeating the same identity. The same thoughts. The same habits. The same excuses. The same emotional patterns. And over time, those repeated patterns become who they believe they are. But here's the truth. Your life can change the moment your identity begins to change. Because lasting transformation doesn't happen when you force yourself temporarily. It happens when your daily actions start reinforcing a new version of you. Right now, ask yourself this question honestly. What identity have I been reinforcing through my daily habits? Not what you want to become. What are your actions currently proving? Because your habits are evidence. If you constantly procrastinate, your brain learns, this is who I am. If you constantly quit, your brain learns, I don't finish things. But the good news is, you can start building a new identity today. Not through giant changes. Through small repeated actions. So after this video, choose one small action that aligns with the person you want to become. One disciplined action. One courageous action. One intentional action. And repeat it daily. Because identity is built through repetition. If you're tired of repeating the same patterns, if you want to understand how real transformation works, and if you're serious about rebuilding your mindset, habits, and identity, then this channel is for you. Because here, we don't just talk about motivation. We talk about becoming. So subscribe now. And join a community of people committed to growing mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and financially, one intentional decision at a time. The life you want begins with the identity you repeat every day. I'll see you in the next episode.